So we are now live, Erica, and welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to have you tonight as a special guest, my love. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm looking at myself. I'm like, is my smile crooked?
No. Listen, it's okay. We quarantining. It's all right.
We are quarantining. We're quarantining hard. Erica, you're in Tennessee, right?
I am.
And so how are things there in Tennessee? It's, here in Georgia, there's a lot of talk about going back to school. What are they deciding, or what are they deciding in Tennessee?
So, our major district, so our biggest district, Metro Nashville Public Schools, because I live right on the outskirts. I don't live inside of Nashville. I live in Mount Juliet. But our biggest district, which is Metro Nashville, they're doing all virtual for the first up until Labor Day, because we start early, and they didn't push the start date back, and so
they have not pushed the start date back.
No, starting August 4th, online virtual and then they're going to reassess Labor Day, and a few of the outlying counties, they're doing a hybrid. So kids have the option to do the remote or in person. And if you decide to come in person, you are required to wear a mask. And so, it's still up in the air. They're still making some decisions. It's district by district.
So in Georgia, it's also district by district. And it's been a real issue that a lot of people have been grappling with. Local school boards are weighing in what's best. Today, however, in Georgia, many people thought that the State Board of Education was going to set an actual start date and push the date back to September the 8th for all schools. But that didn't happen. It didn't happen because, one, the State Board of Education doesn't have that authority to supersede local school boards, although I think our governor may have thought that they did. In the state of Tennessee, one of your representatives, I forget his name, went on Fox News and made a statement that teachers and anyone else who didn't want to return to school could and wanted to hurt the economy could kiss his derriere. But he used another word for derriere. Are you familiar with this congressman?
No. Who did that?
You know what? I saw it in the news a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to have to go back in and get my facts. But it wasn't Lamar Alexander.
He's retiring after this year.
Who is your other state? Who's your? It may have been your other. If you said the name, I remember it. He's an older gentleman.
Haggerty.
He has a very saggy face.
Is it Haggerty? Because I know he's up for re-election, so it might be Haggerty.
I'm going to find that out before we conclude tonight's live. But Eric, we have a lot to talk about. So, I saw your article in the New York Times. You were featured in April in an article about the impact of COVID-19 on businesses, especially on consultants and people who do this, what you do as a living. Tell us a little bit about that article and what your perspective was for the American worker.
So the article, I wasn't even expecting it to be, first of all, let's say I thought I was just talking to a reporter, just, to give some insight. I didn't realize it was going to be a feature. So I had reached out to the reporter because one of the things that they wanted to discuss was how the pandemic was actually affecting the economy and, just businesses. And so one of the industries in general, right? And so I reached out to him and was like, hey, I'm an educator and I'm now a full-time educational consultant. And the way this has impacted me is once school shut down, all of our business, because it's in person in schools, stopped. And so I was set to, honestly, Zach, I was set to hop on a flight on Monday morning, had talked to my principals on Friday, touched base with them again on Saturday, and they were like, nope, we're all good. Sunday, probably about 9:00, it was like, nope, we're done. And so then it was just a ripple effect of how it closed. And so the way that feature came about is because one of the things that I was telling the reporter was, hey, this is education. No matter what goes on in the economy, you don't expect it to hit education the way it has hit education. And now we're having to rethink how we educate. So
And for those of you who are watching us on the live, we definitely need your input and impact. The first question that we wanted you to kind of address and kind of share with us was, what are your thoughts about returning to school, especially now with so many things being up in the air? The next question I kind of want you guys to address who are watching us live is, I want you to talk about and tell us, how has COVID-19 impacted the financial elements of the education industry, if you have anything to share. So Erica, you as a consultant, you travel all around the world, presenting and sharing information, and your two specialty areas are literacy and social and emotional learning.
Yes.
And you've been tweeting up a storm. So first off, tell everybody how they can find your Twitter, and I'm going to also put that in the chat. So how can they find you on Twitter?
So my Twitter is the Erica Battle. Instagram too. Actually, all of my social media handles. Instagram is also the Erica Battle, and even on LinkedIn, I'm the Erica Battle on LinkedIn, just to kind of make it consistent. So that's how you can find me on those platforms.
And you have been really very active and really kind of giving out advice, recommendations, really hard questions for people about what they need to do during this epidemic. And so you, having been personally impacted with your finances, as you know, me as well, you know, being that we're in a different area of the actual educational field, it has had a pretty big impact. So while we're waiting on some of our viewers to join in and share kind of their thoughts on it, you know, in this time frame, you talked about some ways and things that, you know, can be done to mitigate COVID-19 for students and families. I want to start off, though, with families, because I think that many people are underestimating the impact of COVID-19 on the households, or they're not thinking about it. And I think a lot of people in education may not be as attuned to that part of what we do compared to the instructional pieces of what we do. Right. So, and it's really kind of a big battle right now. Some people are pitting parents against students.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that as well in the, like, on social media, in the news, a battle between parents wanting or being forced to go back to work and not having adequate childcare, and them wanting to then push schools to open, although it may not be safe.
Right. And you know what? And it's not even necessarily parents against students, it's parents against schools and the teachers. One of the things that I have seen that's missing from the conversation is we haven't asked, you know, we talked about frontline workers as it relates to healthcare, right? And how our nurses and our doctors and the people that keep the hospitals and things clean as the frontline workers in healthcare. Well, when you think about education, your teachers, your cafeteria workers, your custodians, your office staff, those now become your frontline workers. And I've heard a lot of conversation of students needing to return, parents needing to go to work, but we haven't had a lot of conversation about the safety of teachers. We've talked about the safety of students and what we could do for students, but we haven't talked about teachers. Like, you know, and even though, you know, you and I are not in the classroom, you know, at this time, at one point in time, that was us, right?
Right. And we're around, you know, we're in different schools in different parts of the country every day.
Every day, right. And so it's one of those conversations where, you know, it is like, at first, teachers were a godsend when schools shut down and parents realized the amount of work that goes into facilitating a successful lesson and making sure a child learns and sit there and pay attention. And now, you know, it's kind of like, well, why don't y'all want to work? You know, and it's like, what? We never said that. But we also want to be safe, because teachers do have families. They also have children, and they also have livelihoods that they have to protect as well. So.
It is, you know, and just to kind of share my perspective, I think it's really heartbreaking how politicians have taken this issue and they're using it as a divide between communities. And they're completely negating the fact that, one, teachers vote and they're very involved civically, and that, two, teachers have families and many teachers are taking care of older relatives, or they themselves are right there at retirement age. And if teachers chose not to return to those classrooms, if they're being forced to do so, then you're already on the verge of a major teacher shortage anyway. So the whole entire issue to me is very concerning, and it's really, really scary. One thing that there's so many great questions, so we're gonna just dive right into it, Erica, right? So got some hard ones, but One thing that was raised, and you do Twitter chats, right?
Sometimes I do.
Okay.
I try to.
And so here's the very first question for you as a SEL person and as a literacy person, is that number one, how do you recommend young children learn to read in this virtual environment? So for school systems that are going back virtual, you have kindergartners, first graders, second graders, in that critical gap when students are learning to read so they can eventually get to the point of being able to read to learn. What are some things that you would recommend school districts and teachers do to ensure that this can happen?
Well, one of the things, that is a great question. I was talking about literacy with another teacher yesterday, and how if we don't get a handle on this, because let me tell you, Zach, I've seen poor literacy instruction in person, right? So taking literacy instruction virtual is like scary to someone who has witnessed poor literacy instruction in person. Okay, just let me say that. So one of the things that a negative aspect of pitting teachers and parents against each other is, at this time, we're really going to need parents to help facilitate some of that learning, right? And if schools and school districts were really forward thinking and looking at, all right, so at least by the first 4 to 5 weeks, what is it that I need my kindergartners to learn? What are those sounds? What are those sight words? What are those skills that I would normally be teaching in, face to face, that I'm gonna still have to facilitate, but I'm gonna also need parents to help me with that. Well, if I'm a parent, right, and I am not confident in my own reading ability, how confident am I going to be teaching my child? And then the question becomes, what safeguards does the school have in place to help parents facilitate that learning?
And so let's say there are none, right? Because I'm in 100% agreement. That right there, what you just said was a quotable, tweetable moment, right? You have ahas and oh no's, and I need our viewers to share some of those key points or get in with some questions, add to the discussion, because you guys keep it hot, spicy, interesting. But Erica, I agree 100%, right? Like, our students need their parents now more than ever to be involved in the educational process. But how can schools and teachers create systems in order for that to happen? Because many of them don't know, right? So and I think back to, people in my family who graduated high school, did good in school, who went off and they have other career fields, but they have no knowledge of how they learn to read. Because when you're learning to read, you're not metacognitively developed to where you hold on to that knowledge.
Right.
So what are some things that teachers and schools can do to ensure that parents are being taught at the same time as a child, so that the parents for young kids can be really able to support that kid, whether they're in the classroom with them virtually, or if they're working and they have to come home and then help their babies? How can schools set up systems for that best? I have an idea, but I want to hear your perspective first, and then I'll chime in with, my little extra piece.
No, I want to know. One of the things, all I can think about is, Zach, is, schools are supposed to have these office hours where they're available. They can't all be traditional office hours, right? Now we have the flexibility to do school different, to meet people where they are, whether it is having to kind of teach parents some of the science to reading, right? Because this is going to be a learning curve, not just for the 5-year-old who is now going to meet their teacher for the first time online and not be able to hug their knee, right? So now we have a space. And now, whereas parents, I think parents have gotten comfortable being more hands-off than hands-on. And we leave it up to the school, and then we kind of pitch in when we need to. And now it's not a maybe I should. It is we definitely need you to help facilitate the learning of the child that you're with every day. So
they're going to have to be there. I know that Tasha is with us, and I think Tasha, let me know if you're still there, and if you're still, doing second grade. I thought it was second grade, maybe fourth grade, but I know that your perspective will also help us there. Erica, I agree 129%, right? Like, you're absolutely right. The role that parents are going to have to play in this time is going to change, but what support system schools give to those parents will also have to be there.
Right.
I really want to see, this is one thing, because I always look in the lens of, if I was in a position in the school system, I look at having been a director of curriculum instruction for Atlanta Public Schools, and I always think, what would be my push to make the right thing happen for my parents and my families? And I would really be advocating for an adjustment being made to the school day. And Natasha, I want to know your thoughts and what you recommend for what should teachers do to support kids at home learning how to read? Because that's, especially even in second grade, is that crucial year where it all comes together. And for a lot of our first graders and second graders who are going to now second grade and third grade, that didn't happen. It didn't come together. We weren't able to really finish up that the blending and braiding that happens. So it's going to definitely be there. But I recommend that maybe even looking at a different way of doing instruction during the day and restructuring and redistributing a teacher's time. So instead of looking at, we're going to start virtually at this time of the day, we're going to have a teacher work from 8 o'clock to 2:30 or 8 o'clock to 3:30, looking at really giving kids, and the best practice around remote and distance learning, you have 4 hours of instruction in a day, and that's it. And you divide that up, you streamline, you prioritize what you do in those 4 hours, but then you build out 2-hour blocks of time. You're still working a 7.5-hour quote unquote day, but you're putting time in the afternoons so that parents can participate in parent universities, or parent college, or parent school, or parent academy, or whatever you want to call it. And those parents then get first grade instructional skills and strategies to support their kids, where they get a review of what happened, and then they also get some assistance from the teacher in helping their kid at home, so the learning doesn't stop and it continues. And it's creative and it's fun, and they look at ways of making, like, even family engagement or family fun time.
I'm going to say that. Yeah,
right. It's fun, where it's not like a parent trying to teach a child, but it's like a parent just talking through with their child, and their parent joining in and then pushing through with their child. Maybe again, you teach from maybe 10 o'clock until 2 o'clock, and then you have your parent university times with one teacher. And it wouldn't be the whole grade level. It would be on Monday nights, it could be teacher A. Every Tuesday is teacher B. Let the teachers have that control over that piece of it. You can have as many parents for the grade level join in because you can have up to 100 plus people on Zoom calls, and really allow them to do that in addition to their office hours. The office hours to me would be where they would have a chance to actually ask targeted questions, but it's the parent university or parent college or whatever you want to call that, the parent can really engage in really being able to look and support that. In addition to also filming or recording the classroom instruction. So people could then go back and watch what happens during that virtual time frame as well. And I think that's going to be a really big push. We got some great comments in here. Hey, Dr. Brody, my good friend, Dr. Brody is on the line. You and I must catch up. It's been a long time.
You know what, Zach, though? Another thing that I had also thought would be a great idea is for teachers to make sure to send the materials home. And while they're doing that parent university, teachers are using their actual teaching materials while they're working with the parents. So it's like, hey, this is what I've gone over for the day. All right, let's look at this passage. What are the sounds that we've done? And so it gives the parents the exact, this, I'm not just giving you fun activities and extra things to do. These are things that we're really doing. But one of the things that schools really have to understand is they have to be prepared to do it. So they have to be prepared to send the materials home, right? Lessons kind of have to be already kind of prepared. A pacing as to what this virtual instruction is going to look like is going to have to already be thought about, but also taken into consideration of what the kids did not get last semester or last school year. Because listen, I mean, we went through to remote learning on an emergency plan, right? And so
it wasn't remote learning. It was emergency learning.
Right. So that's what I want to say. So let's agree that not all schools transitioned properly, and a lot of kids did not get what they needed to finish out the school year, and they were not getting what they needed already. So there were already gaps there. So, it's like we're having to be mindful of the gaps that need to be addressed while still progressing as relates with the learning.
That's very, and so that brings up kind of a second point that, before we go to the next question, our next question is going to be about the relationships to create a good classroom environment in a virtual world. So Eric, that's kind of my next question that we're going to get to. But everyone in a school system has a really large role to play right now. Yeah. And I want my teachers to make sure that they're holding everybody accountable, because you're being held accountable. When the Secretary of Education gets in front of the world and takes that opportunity to say that teachers, for the most part, have not done a good job, they're holding you accountable. Our Secretary of Education didn't say that principals didn't do a good job. She didn't say that superintendents didn't do a good job. She didn't say that central office staff didn't do a good job. She said our teachers were the ones, for the most part, hadn't done a good job, not counting private schools and parochial schools and charter schools and all the people that she cares about. So with that being said, when you talk about, Erica, readjusting that pacing guide, I want teachers to really advocate, if they're in a school system with a robust central office, that is the work of a strong curriculum and instruction team. Mm-hmm. As a former curriculum coordinator, that's what my job was for my teachers, was to take that pacing guide and say, I know that school ended abruptly in March or April. These are the key standards that people missed. I'm now going to chunk those standards and create a plan for remediation over those standards and reteach of those standards, and then roll out how new standards to the next grade level will then occur, and then have a finite stopping place at the end of the year. And if you're in a small school system where you don't have a lot of central office support, that's when you ask your instructional assistant principal to assist you, to link in, to join in. And if either of those two bodies don't have the expertise, you call in people, or you ask them to call in people with their CARES Act funding to give you the consultant work to do it, because teachers cannot do everything. And I think that's a large part of the frustration that many of our educators are feeling, because they realize kids are going to come into their new classrooms behind where they should be, when they always come in behind where they should be. And it adds to a higher level of frustration, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of fear. And teachers already have that going on. There's already a large level of fear that our teachers are being impacted by. So I think that's, really, really scary for our people. And Dr. Brody, stated that again, that outline should be there and provided. And hope, Dr. Brody, because I know where you work, I hope that your central office is providing that for you. I know they are in ELA. I know that. I've talked to the person who's doing it. And also that, again, there has to be a plan for teachers to develop that support as well. And I really want to see hope that we also see when school returns, our administrative teams doing more to support the social and emotional well-being of their staff members. But that's coming up. You want to add into that?
Well, I worked with a school in Mississippi, and our focus, because we have some virtual sessions coming up, and our focus is actually the teachers, because I worked with the teachers at the end of the year to kind of talk about the trauma that the kids would, the indirect trauma that impacts the kids, and how they have to be patient, but then they have to also think about how traumatic this was for them, and to be mindful of what might trigger them. Right. And so as we continue the conversation, it was, when we meet next, let's have a focus on the social and emotional well-being of our teachers, because teachers were isolated from each other. Their year was ended abruptly. They didn't get to say goodbyes. They didn't get to clean out their classrooms. They didn't get to do all of the end of the year activities that they would normally do. And so just like the kids' years ended abruptly, the teachers' year ended abruptly. Their routine was messed up. Their structure was gone. And that's what, a lot of the teachers expressed, like, I didn't realize how much I really needed my school day to help keep me focused. And now I just feel like I'm out here isolated, just kind of blowing in the wind. And so when we talk about, and I made mention to this on LinkedIn, when we talk about addressing the social and emotional well-being of the stakeholders, we can't just talk about students. We have to talk about parents who might have lost their job because a company closed. And now I have to not only worry about taking care of my family, I have to worry about facilitating learning. I have to make sure the kid eats. Now the kid is like, I didn't get to say goodbye to my friends. You know, we have all of these other underlying issues, and it can't just be about one stakeholder. How does this affect everyone in a school? Everyone. So,
and it is affecting everyone. And I think that's a key lesson is that, and I think many of our teachers get that, but we have to make sure that everyone involved thinks globally, because it's affecting every home. You know, whether if everyone knows someone who, probably knows someone who has been impacted by COVID-19. And unfortunately, with today hitting the 4 million mark, we're probably all hitting a place where we all know someone that we care about and love who has contracted COVID-19 if it's not us. And it's most certainly going to be the case for that, for our, teachers, and, for our kids coming back in. And we also, you're looking at the economy, and as much as we want the economy to rebound, as much as we want everything to go back to being as close to normal as possible, there are some businesses that are not going to rehire. Right. There's some businesses that are going to not reopen. And that has a huge impact. And what we're finding is that it's having a larger impact on our Black and brown babies, because their families are being impacted by COVID-19 at a higher rate than some others. And so I want you, that's coming up as a question too, as to what can teachers do to support these kids. But really, when you think about building up a new school year, and you think about creating a classroom culture, Erica, how can teachers do that online? How can you create a good classroom culture for your children in a virtual environment?
You know, that is going to be very interesting. Right. And one of the things that, I would do as a teacher, if I had the opportunity, is I would meet with my kids in small groups first, in groups of 5, just getting to know them. Because I'm not going to be able to have you all together. Some kids will already know each other. Some kids will not. Right. So you'll already have cliques that's formed. How can you find some commonalities among your students? Right. We can't just put them in breakout rooms by themselves, unsupervised, they're kids. So that's something we can't do. But how can you find the commonalities? So when you are, I don't think small groups should go away just because we're virtual. Right. We can't always do things in groups of 30. How can you find those commonalities, do some small group activities with your students as you're breaking up your classroom so you can build some camaraderie, but you need to also make it flexible. So not only am I just working with Zach every time we group, now I've had the opportunity to work with Zach and Terry and John, so I can get to know you in a different type of way. So an interest inventory is going to be important, so you can find out about the kid, but you can also figure out what are the commonalities that my students have that I can begin to, kind of group and, bring out so we can see that we're not as different as we think.
Erica, I love that. And you know what, one thing, and I'm going to share this too, like I'm very concerned about, there was an article written where the school system said that they were going to furlough the PE teachers, the specials teachers, chorus, fine arts, and they were actually going to possibly let them go until they return back to face-to-face instruction, which was ridiculous. But it made me then fear that if we don't return to a traditional school day and school year, you could have more school systems thinking that these people are expendable when we know that they're not. And we know that they're an essential part of a school community and a school culture and a student school day. So when you say having small groups and breakouts, that's something that really anybody could help support and also facilitate in a very organized way. So while the teacher is working with us, that's right, the staff part of your faculty, where you could have some strong any paraprofessional, anyone who's working employed in a virtual environment, they could do some whole group activity while the teacher has that more intimate one-on-one time in small groups.
Yeah.
Also another opportunity for the flexibility of a virtual school day, that you have blocks of time where you give on perhaps your breakout days, you have 2 hours of direct instruction in a content area where you may have math on Monday, or pieces of it throughout, hardcore explicit instruction on Monday with pieces throughout the week. But then you have 2 hours of small group times, and then students are assigned their times for small groups. Right. And then they log back in. So they will have break or specials or whatever they may have, then coming back in your small group, so that you can have that good classroom culture and environment being put in. And it also gives the children time to express their urgent needs and issues. Erica, as you've seen remote learning happen across the country, because I know you've seen multiple school systems do this, you work all over the United States for the International Center of Leadership and Education, as well as your own independent work as an expert in the field. What has been the biggest challenge that you've seen our students and teachers face? So let's start first with students and then teachers.
I think one of the biggest thing was structure and routine. Because this was just kind of thrown at us and kind of just put together, the structure and the routine of it didn't take hold per se. And so you would find some kids that were like, yes, this is what I do. And then other kids like, I'm not going to that, right? And so one of the biggest things for me was the structure and the routine of what remote learning was supposed to look like. We didn't have an opportunity to put a true plan in place. And so we had to just go about it as we may. And so because of, sometimes when we're lax, when you're laxed about something, the person it's supposed to feel important to, no, it's not. It wasn't important to you, so it can't be important to me, right? And so when we started out, just like, come pick up your packet, and then it was like, okay, now we're about to hop on the computers and meet, but it wasn't consistent with consistent instruction. That right there kind of put a bad taste in people's mouth for remote learning out the jump. So the structure, the consistency, and the routines, and I'm not saying everyone, right, was not in place. And so it made it very hard to make this model look as if we were still really delivering and facilitating true, rigorous instruction to address our students' learning needs. I mean, that was really the biggest thing for me. I don't know if you saw something different, but to me, it was, No,
I agree. And I also asked this up in the chat so that, those who are in with us could also join in and kind of give us their insight if there are any challenges that they face or that they've seen. I believe 100% what you said. We were not ready for this.
Right.
But somehow, by the grace of God, by the ingenuity of teachers, by the necessity of who we are as educators, teachers found a way to go full remote and distance learning in 1 week.
Some districts took a few weeks, and I'm not going to call any specifically, but some districts were not ready to go with that week. And they had weeks that kind of lapsed without kids or parents having any direction on what to do next. It was check our website for updates. Now, I'm a teacher, so I'm on our side 100%. And that does not fall completely on the teacher, right? That's not a teacher's, fault. But we went totally remote, and so everybody had to wrap their head around, what does that look like? What does that look like when, like Dr. Brody said, I have kids too that's at home? Because, see, the difference with me is I have kids, but I have older kids. So my kids are in high school. The problem with us doing things online together, it killed our internet. So our internet would just go out for no reason in the middle of us working. And so maybe I won't use the word lax because I don't want to, because I'm a teacher to the heart. And
Dr. Brody called you out. Now she ain't having it. No.
I don't mean it to the point of we weren't wanting to do anything, right. And not at all, but we were not prepared. And so when we're not prepared for a structure, nor did we know how long we were going to be out of school. So did we properly understand and know how to prepare for that moment? I'm going to say no, we didn't know how to prepare. And truly, it's not on the teachers to prepare for that moment. That's someone a little bit above their pay grade to prepare for that moment. And so, you had some districts who were able to roll it out immediately. And then some districts who still have not been able to roll it out because they don't have the technology, right? The teachers have not been interested in really integrating technology into their regular school day, right? Because they didn't feel the importance of it. And then when we didn't have a plan in place, you know how kids are. They were like, shoot, I'm not gonna come get no packet. I'm not gonna do a packet worth of work every day.
That's right.
And
you know what? I gotta jump on Rosalind here. Rosalind, look, tonight at 9:00, I'm coming back on. I know you're like, I'm not gonna be on Facebook that long. Take a break, but come back at 9:00 because I'm doing a live with her name is Brittany Ng, and she is an actress on BET's Boomerang, but she's been on a lot of TV shows. And I know that this is your field, your passion, and your side gig beyond education. And I think that you would like it. So I'm glad you're joining in. And I also know where we met, where you worked. And I want to say that this comment really does bring up a really large issue in this moment, Eric, and I want you to talk to it as well, because I know in addition to what you do with literacy and SEL, you're a very big, you have a large body of expertise around instruction in distance learning, remote learning, virtual learning, personalized learning, and competency-based instruction. Well, one thing that that COVID-19 brought to the forefront in America is the equity divide that exists in access to devices as well as access to connectivity. And it's something that I absolutely cannot stop thinking about. It really does, right? So I've been very fortunate. This is being sponsored by the Educator's Room. For everybody out there, if you don't know the Educator's Room, it's an education website, one of the largest in the United States. There are tons of great articles, great resources there. It's always updated. It's a true network of master educators called the Educator's Room, completely free. Everything's free. Go to it. When you talk about teacher self-care, it came from the Educator's Room. They created this concept years ago, and it's catching on. Everyone's using it. But that's where it kind of goes from. And they're even having a teacher self-care conference to gear you up for the new school year and what you can do to stay recharged, to stay energized, and to stay ready for all the things that you're going to face in an unpredictable year. Mm-hmm. But when you look at equity and you look at what students have access to, I can't shake the concern that I have about kids in rural areas who do not have internet connectivity, where they're going to school and picking up packets of stuff, filling the packets out and turning packets back in because internet access is an issue, and it's 2020.
And it's still an issue, right? Don't think it was solved in a couple of months. It's still going to be an issue. And one of the things that COVID-19 showed us is that those who have the means, their education continued with little to no disruption, right? I take my son, for example. My kids do go to private school. And it just so happened when our city shut down, my son's school was on spring break. So they immediately went into, okay, what do we do once spring break is over? And immediately had a plan in place to how the learning was going to take place for their students, right? Immediately. And so learning did not stop for them. It kept going. Now, of course, there was some gaps here and there, but not really, none that disrupted really their learning or at all. Whereas you have other students who they don't have a computer. Their internet is their, cellular data, right? They don't have the internet at home, and then they don't have someone that's there with them regularly to make sure that they're even logging on, because my mom is an essential worker. They're either, working those those hourly wage jobs, and they have to be there. Right. And so what COVID-19 showed us is that equity is not a concept. Equity is real. And when there are inequities inside of a district, because it's some areas in our district, that still have money, great PTA. I'm not, but let me tell you, it's some schools, even in this remote area, that the parents have already gotten together, polled each other, and said, hey, who has space here? Who has space here? All right, we're getting together a learning pod. We're going to hire this retired teacher. We're going to pool our funds together. And even though our kids are all the way remote, they're still going to have some face-to-face instructional time, social distance.
Yep. And you know what? While that mom isn't going to work, she's just going to be in the other room, child free.
Right. So, but then you have other students who don't have that at all. And they just kind of have to make it work. And so what COVID-19 showed us is that if you don't have the means, you really didn't have the access to the education that you're supposed to be given, the access to.
That's right. And it completely debunks the concept of education being the great equalizer, because it's not the great equalizer. It's not equal. It's not equal. There's no way it can be equal.
If I can access it, how can it be equal if I can't even access it? I'm one of the ones that got to get a packet because I don't have a device. And my district really didn't have a plan on if they were going to loan devices, how they were going to get, And so if you're not a one-to-one district who has that capabilities, you're going to have kids that miss out if they don't have access to the internet, of course, then it was like, okay, well, we'll give you the $9.99 Xfinity plan. Well, I have $130 Xfinity plan that's not real reliable sometimes. It goes out 5 or 6 times a day. So does that really still give me the access that I need in order to access this virtual learning environment?
And one thing we found in the city of Atlanta is that if the parents had a bill previously, they could not get the $9.99 plan until they paid the previous cable bill or whatever they still owe with Comcast.
They couldn't afford.
That's right. That they couldn't afford. They didn't pay it the first time because they couldn't afford it. So now you can't get the $9.99 because you have an outstanding balance, which again added to the inequity. What can school districts do, if anything, Erica, to address that?
So I will say that our district down here used our largest district used their care funds to purchase new computers for all 90,000 kids and some hotspots. This is the issue. Every district needs computers. So there are not 90,000 computers available to be sent because schools all across America are now trying to get computers. So now that is something that they can do. How can you access those funds? Remember years ago when the government would switch out their computer systems and then put them in surplus? Yep. It's time we might have to pull those out of surplus. They might not necessarily be the best thing, but what are you doing with them? You're trying to sell them. So it's, districts almost have their hands tied because of our great, Secretary of State for the United States feels like private schools need a little bit more money.
Yeah, the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos,
she
$2 billion. I want to say it was $2 billion of the $2 trillion to private schools.
Allocate to private schools because they need just a little bit more. Whereas, the public schools who are in dire need really didn't get any money to increase their technology at all to help the students that really need it. So when we're talking about inequities, we're still there. Is it just a conversation? Has inequity become just another buzzword that we say when we notice these things? Or when are we going to really take action on what we see? That becomes the question. Are we going to take some action? And what actions can we take?
So it was brought up on, I can't say I necessarily agreed with it, but it was brought up on a previous discussion I had with the educators room where we were talking about, and that's something that we're going to talk about too, Dr. Brody. I'm so glad you brought that up about the large number. I talked to a good friend of mine today. She's a French teacher, and they're actually going to reduce they're reducing their staff. They have a vacancy. They're not going to fill the vacancy, and they're going to give her more than 32 students per class. And so, and she's in a district that's still trying to force them to return face to face. I want to talk about, that issue as well. But on the live, Erica, we talked about what our major industries and who have gotten money from education should be now doing to give back. We talked about Apple. We talked about Microsoft. We talked about Amazon. We all know that many educational school systems put a lot of money in those companies. Mm-hmm. Should they be doing more to ensure that every child has internet access? Should they be doing more to give back and ensuring that every child has a computer or device? Listen. Or is that the function of the federal government?
The federal government does have a responsibility to educate its citizens, right? But then you also have companies that we purchase things from. Amazon is what, $1 trillion company now because of COVID. And, you know, so you mean to tell me you're already getting tax breaks, right? Because of the jobs that you create. So you mean to tell me that you couldn't take some of that and push the technology needs or just some funding, right, into the schools? Of course. I think we all have some type of civic responsibility to help the education system, especially since the kids that we are educating will at one point, you know, in the future be the workers in these industries. So why wouldn't you have a vested interest in helping the school community, especially when you have the opportunity and the means?
And many of them do have the means to do more, right? And I think that if our large corporations that have benefited and profited from education came together and then gave back, and that includes, you know, some companies that we know in the educational textbook industry, this is a time to give out resources. This is time to make things very accessible and free and join in together and say that, you know, we are all in this together for our school systems. I saw something today, and Natasha said they won't because it's capitalism.
Right. Education is $1 billion industry, Zach.
It is.
Okay, education is, you know, education, but it's also a business, and it is a business. And I think sometimes we forget that education is a business, and it is a business, and that people know there's money to be made in education.
We saw, so of course, I think everyone probably is aware that, you know, we are getting this close to another stimulus package being negotiated, not being passed, but being negotiated. You know, Erica, I'm sure you know by now that I'm a huge, picking up my charge, like a charge this battery, so I won't go dead during the live. You know that I'm a huge politics, government, news junkie. I mean, true news junkie. In our Republican-led House and the White House, they're working, quote unquote, together, trying to come up with a Republican plan. The Democratic plan from the House was already released. It was released, I want to say, in May. They made
it's been a couple of months since
they released They released a $3 trillion stimulus plan, part 2, in May. That the House, that the Senate immediately said, no, there's no way we're going to pass it. The Senator Leader Mitch McConnell actually declined, said we won't even have a second stimulus. But now, because of poll numbers, they're looking at the American worker and what the American people are saying. They are definitely going to do a second stimulus, but they're debating what it would be. One thing they're talking about is not giving any direct checks out at all. Another thing that's being debated is not giving out any disbursements to anyone making more than $40,000 last year, regardless of what you're dealing with this year. And they're really struggling, not wanting to continue the $600 unemployment benefits. So all of that is happening. I saw, with that being said, and I said that to say, I saw online today on Facebook that the United States has a military budget of $738 billion. And we gave our people a one-time stimulus check of $1,200. Not only do we have a military budget of $738 billion, but we're increasing that budget to send people into cities across the United States that are run by Democratic leadership, so that we can send the perception of the need to have law and order. And we can take the American people's mind away from COVID-19 and the 4 million people that have been affected by this disease. In Canada, where COVID-19 cases have dwindled to being truly able to reopen and go back to school, their military budget is only $21.9 billion, and they have given everyone every month since April $2,000 per month. Mm-hmm. Everyone's got a $2,000 per month stimulus check, and I think that right there
froze rent and mortgage. Don't forget about that. They froze.
They froze. That to me is a huge gap and a huge discrepancy. And I really think that both our government as well as our businesses could do a whole lot more to help the American people at this time. So, Erica, one thing that you did recently was release a brand new publication.
I did.
Yeah, tell us about it.
So, literacy is my thing. I was a reading teacher, and I needed, and I always worked with Black and brown students, and they were never fully prepared. Most of my students came to me with gaps, big gaps, I remember teaching 5th grade one year, and I had a student come to me on pre-primer. That's where he was literally reading. And I had to ask, myself, who keeps pushing him through school? Because that's what they were doing, really just pushing him through school. And so being the person that I am, I always taught from a place of, what if this was my kid? That's how I think about education. I have 3 kids, and I think about, would I want my kid in my class? I need to teach these kids as if my baby was sitting in front of me and I needed to give him everything I got, right? And so I had to come up with a way to help my students be able to interact with text. I needed them to be able to understand how to comprehend. I needed them to be able to understand how to question the text and how to have conversation around the text. Because one of the things that I noticed that their teachers practiced and made sure they were, had good fluency numbers. They could read a passage really fast, but didn't understand anything they read, didn't understand or remember anything they read.
They had the oral reading fluency and automaticity down, yes, but they could not comprehend.
No, they couldn't bring it back. They couldn't have a discussion about it. They couldn't question any comprehension questions I asked. They were like, I don't know. If I asked them to go back to find it, they couldn't, because that's all they were focused on, was being able to spit those words out and, the Dibbles test and really have a high word per minute rate. Right. And so one of the things that I did was I created a system for 2 reasons. One, to help me to understand where my kids were struggling, and I could just kind of skim and scan the room visually. And then 2, it allowed my lowest reader to be able to access the text just as my highest reader. And so the system was called Are You Actively Reading and Engaging? So it's like ARE, and that stands for Actively Reading and Engaging. So I came up with this system called Are You Actively Reading and Engaging? And really it is 11 comprehension strategies. I have them I have them color coded in a booklet for the kids to be able to use. And so I teach them the strategies explicitly, one at a time. Like I teach them what it means to question the text. Find a piece of the passage, mark it. What question do you have? And I have everyone identify their passage and the question that came into their mind. Right. And have a discussion based on questions. So I taught them how to engage in the text, question it, have discussions. I also taught them how to make connections, whether it was a personal connection or a connection with something else that they read, because that wasn't something that they were used to doing. They weren't used to making those connections. And so what I did was I put it into a system and I created the tool. I published a read and response journal that went with it. And so, okay, so let me talk, Dr. Brody, you're exactly right. They couldn't comprehend because a lot of them did not have the prior knowledge or see the relevancy, but they really just couldn't comprehend because that wasn't their focus when they were reading. Their focus when they were reading for me was to make sure that they got the words right. That's all they needed to do, was to be able to make sure I could get the words right.
And then I was rewarded previously, so they were good to go.
Right. I wasn't asked any questions after I read. It was just like, can you read this for me? Great. Your speed increased, your accuracy increased. And that was the focus. We don't ask our students to really question the text. You know, I've been in high school classrooms where high school teachers have not asked those complex
questions. Is R grade level specific, or can R be applied to any grade band?
So it is perfect for readers 3rd grade and up. So it is for readers who are beginning to read those longer passages and who need to understand what it means to actually comprehend and interact with text. So it's not grade band specific. It's just one tool that can be used from 3rd grade up. And I say 3rd grade because that's when they begin to have to read. They have to read for understanding and learning, but then they start getting that fiction text. So they're no longer, that nonfiction text. Yeah. So they're no longer just reading stories. Now I'm really being introduced to that nonfiction text. And you're just now introducing it to me, but you're not teaching me how to really understand and dive into it. I also created a graphic organizer workbook to go with it as well. And the graphic organizer workbook has a graphic organizer for each strategy. And each strategy actually has 2 graphic organizers so you can explicitly teach the strategy.
That's a lot of stuff. Huh? That's a lot of stuff, Erica, and it sounds expensive.
It's not expensive at all.
Because you're talking about 3 different. So for a school system, like what are we dealing with a price point? Because there's some people that's gonna want to get one.
So for a class, say for instance, for a class set of 25, you would get 25 tools, 25 journals, and 1 graphic organizer workbook to make copies. It's like $340. That's not expensive.
No, that's good. That is good. So one thing that I want to do is I want to get a sample kit to give to one of our viewers. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. And so we're going to get this sample kit to one of our viewers. And so I want to know from, out there, who wants a sample kit. And that's what we'll see. And we'll see what we get back. And bam, that's who we will get this sample kit to. And that's going to be my contribution to my friend Erica. I'm paying for that. I'm going to get that for them. And then it's also my contribution to our teacher. So that teacher will now have a new tool, or parent, because parents could use this as well with their kids, correct?
Yes, it is good for either home or school. It really would have been perfect. And of course, I just released it, but it really would have been perfect for this space because the student would have had a tool at home and the teacher would have been able to utilize that tool for that learning. Dr. Brody, the actual tool is not. You would actually need a class set. I asked that we don't, because of course it is skill, but it's preferable. I prefer that you order one for each kid. So yeah. So the short answer is no, but I know how.
And so Dr. Brody, Dr. Brody was the first one to respond, and she said, me. Nicole, you got it. It's yours. I'm going. So, Eric and I will get that ready and get that to you before you guys go back to school and go back to work in a couple of weeks. So, here's my question, Erica, because I think this may be also a really good opportunity if you could. Is there any way to make any of it, like maybe one of them, free so people can see it, look at it, fall in love with it? Put it on the website. Erica, put it on the website. Put one on the website.
So what I'll do is I can the graphic organizer workbook. I don't like to necessarily put the actual system.
This is my mama. Hey. No, you're not gonna get it. No, that's not fair, Ma. No.
I will make a portion of it free. I have a little sample where you can see what it looks like.
Yeah, but I'm not done at having you do free stuff. So number one, I want you to make one free, and I want you to do a digital teaching where you show the parents how to use it. I think that could be super transformational, right? And so then everyone's gonna see you in action, see how awesome you are as a teacher of adults. And then they're gonna, hopefully, I think, bring you in virtually to keep working. Yeah, I think that our parents need us right now to help them help their kids, and that's something that I'm thinking, how can we do that, and what can we do to be of greater support? So I'm thinking that through too as well. Maybe we can do a virtual parent university for people in general about how to help these babies read?
Yeah, you know what? So a couple of another consultant and I, Felicia Bell Hurd, and a couple of teachers, we were looking at how to put on a virtual conference for parents called Having Success Through Remote Learning. But we wanted to talk more about not just literacy, but talk about mindfulness, the importance of goal setting during this time, because it's not just free time. How do we make sure that our kids are still focused and, you know, really using this time wisely, even though they're not?
You know, those babies are going to be fine. They're going to be fine, Mom. I promise you. We'll find some way to do something for them. One day we will find some way to help them. Megan wanted to know, you know, how do we, you know, we suggest doing this without the actual notebooks in a virtual environment? Because we know it's going to be great to have them when they go back to school and they're face to face. But for schools that are starting virtually, how can we use these resources that you have?
In all honesty, I still feel like even in a virtual environment, kids need to have something tangible that they're working with and that they're tangible. I don't think that everything that a young kid does needs to be online, because reading online and reading something in my hand takes a different skill set. And so we still need to be very mindful as we're passing out materials to make sure that kids still have something tangible in their hand, that they understand how to read with their hands, honestly.
So my very good friend, who's a principal in Henry County, her name is Principal Jody Rowe Calloway. She actually did a lot of the producing. She's very organized. So she made copies and folders and handouts for her children, and they would come and pick it up at a set time. You know, she was there, gave them tons of freebie stuff to make them feel good, and then they would do virtual work. But I want to know from our viewers, for those of you who are in like other school systems, in other schools, did you produce printed copies for kids to pick up, or was everything truly virtual for your students? That's something that I think is really interesting. Is there any way, Erica, that is there any way of getting like a digital license for some of the pieces too? That's something else to think about, right? You know, I'm very, you know, my mind is very entrepreneurial.
Yes.
Is there a way for teachers, right? Let's say I'm a teacher and I want some of your resources. Is there a way that you could create some pieces of it that they could then use in their Google Classroom?
I can offer digital licenses
at a low rate for the teachers, because to be honest, you know, some of our teachers are not going to, like, their school, I've been on that side of it, right?
Yeah.
You're a teacher and you want a really good resource. You know it's what your kids need, but the school system, they don't want to hear it if it's not coming from a big box vendor.
Right. Yes. That is my struggle right now. I think some of the beauty of it is I have some schools that have the autonomy with their budget, who saw the beauty in it and have purchased it, because it really makes sense. Not only is it helpful for students, but it's helpful for the teacher who really doesn't know how to explicitly teach those comprehension skills. Like, I used this tool when I was a specialist to teach my reading teachers how to explicitly teach comprehension. And let me tell you, within 2 years, we were a reward school for progress because of literacy rates and how well they shot up. Well, it wasn't all about the skill set of the kid. Some teachers don't have the skill set. So what the tool does, it gives teachers a tool to explicitly teach the skills, but then it allows the students to be able to follow it, you know, and honestly,
you know, I loved it when I saw it online, Erica. I was like, it's a game changer. I loved it. I thought to myself, you know what? It's all, you know, these are things that we know to do. I love graphic organizers, as Dr. Brody will be able to attest to, and she knows why. You know, and I love how it tracks the way students think. I love organization. I love the structures and routines. And so, you know, when you released a product in June.
Yeah.
Right? Or no?
So yes and no. So I've had it since 2015. So I've had this before I had my SEL book. So, but the SEL took off so much that I really didn't have the opportunity to talk about RU and the benefits of RU. The written response journal was in progress, and I just hadn't had the time to publish it
and get it together.
And hey, I had the time, so it was like, let's get this.
So we have, again, you got Dr. Brody's getting hers from me, so I got that covered. I'm paying for that. But you got, you got Megan, you got Molly, you got Natasha. We got some teachers who've been very active. I know that you need, of course, some like product placement. You need some testimonials. So you just think about what can you consider for these amazing, participants that we can really get them kind of set up and get them what they need to really start off the school year and be successful. And we're going to continue to push it. And really, again, I think it's a game changer. I think it's going to have a big impact. You let me know what I can do to help you and support you as you get RU out there. I'm glad you're back to it.
Thank you.
I love the SEL book and I love the SEL work and I believe in the SEL work, but I also really care about literacy and really ensuring that every teacher who engages with children around any kind of reading, that they have the skills and tools they need to do that very, very heavy lift.
Look, let me tell you, I love literacy. Like I've been, SEL kind of took off, but my first love is literacy. And what was it? A Colleen Beer's book, When Kids Can't Read.
Yes.
I love that book, right? So I was just kind of reading through it again. Just, I read professional books. I don't read novels. I read professional books. That's just the type of reader that I am. And one of the lines that she said, and I was like, bingo, is she said a child's social emotional confidence is tied to how well they think they can read. And so not only are we talking about SEL as it relates to the 5 competencies, but when a kid knows that they can't read and they know that they don't understand, their social confidence goes way down. And so the two are very much related. It's, you can't really separate one from the other. The two are very much related.
And so Megan wants to know, the name of your SEL book.
So the name of my book is called Who Are You? A Guide to Help Adolescents Navigate Through the Social and Emotional Issues of Life. That's the SEL book.
And so one thing that I always do, so once we conclude, Erica, I'm going to go in tonight, I'm going to pull clips. I want to talk about, because there's some people that do not know a lot about SEL. There's some school systems some teachers who are out watching. When you talk about SEL, when you talk about social and emotional learning in schools, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about teaching, of course we know what the 5 competencies are, right?
No, many of our educators don't.
Okay.
Across the United States of America, we know this in large school systems, but I'm from a small town in Mississippi called DeKalb, Mississippi.
Okay.
In Kemper County, very small town, and it's a rural area. I can't say that every teacher in my hometown, as of right now, would know what I'm talking about when I talk about social and emotional learning. So give us the 5 competencies and tell us what is SEL and why does it matter in education?
So the short of it, because I can't give you the long formal CASEL definition, but an organization by the name of CASEL has outlined the 5 competencies of the social emotional learning framework, which are responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness, self-management, and self-awareness, right? And so when we say we are addressing the social and emotional learning needs of students, basically what we're helping students do is become self-aware of who they are, understand how to manage themselves, goals, personal and academic, as well as, other financial goals, as well as teaching them what does a healthy relationship look like? What does it mean to be socially aware, which is respecting the perspectives and opinions of others, right? So we're teaching them all of those skills that unfortunately not every adult has, right? Not every adult understands how to manage self and what a responsible decision looks like, right? We forget that bad decisions have consequences sometimes because we do things in the moment because we were never taught to self-regulate, right? When we talk about self-awareness, we get lost in what we see on social media. So our independent self begins to emulate what we see, right? So when we talk about social and emotional well-being, it's not just one thing, it's multiple skills. And it's just kind of teaching kids, what does it mean to self-regulate? What does it mean to participate in a healthy relationship? How do you respect and appreciate the perspective and the opinions of others? And we don't have a lot of adults that are giving us a great model for these things. So, you have adults that don't have these skills themselves.
And so with you hit it. The next question I was going to ask you is like, what about, so my mom is right there watching and she's in, and what if she would say, well, that's what parents do. That's what I teach my kid. What about people that say that's what the parents do?
Honestly, if you look at the SEL framework, it has 3 components: community, school, and then it's like a district. So it's not just the responsibility of just one stakeholder. So when I say stakeholder, I'm talking about parents, the school, the district, everybody. It's not the responsibility of just one person. It takes a village. Remember, when we talk about raising kids, it takes a village. Whereas some parents, as a teacher, when kids would act a certain way, and then I would call home and then I would talk to the parents, and it'll be like, oh, okay, that's why you act that way. I won't call again, right? So you have to think that some parents don't know how to manage themselves. If you have a parent that every reaction is very volatile, as a kid, if that's all I see, that's going to be my reaction. So a lot of times what I would tell teachers is, if that's the reaction that you see, how can you model something different? Do you also blow up, or do you do like I used to do? And I would say, I'm not sure who you're talking to right now, because I'm not yelling. I can't continue this conversation, so I'm going to walk away. And as an adult, because I was not going to get into a power struggle with the kid, I would walk away. And then I will come back and say, okay, now are you ready? Are you ready to talk about it? Right? But we have to understand that not every kid is taught to have a conversation. They're taught to blow up because that's what's modeled at home. You think about people who continue in relationships that have an abusive cycle. If that's what I saw growing up, whether I'm a male and my father used to hit on, my mom, right? That's just what's ingrained in me. That's what I think. Think about racism. When we talk about social awareness, we're talking about respecting the perspectives and opinions of others. If I'm at home and I'm taught that I don't have to be respect anyone who is unlike me, when I get out into the world, unless I see something different, what I see at home is what I believe. So it's not just the parents, it's us. And we do teach those things by incorporating those skills in real world examples. Right now is the perfect time to talk about everything that we have going on in the world. Is the perfect time to talk about some of those SEL issues that we don't normally get to talk about, because they don't necessarily present themselves the way that they're presenting themselves in this moment.
And you hit such a powerful statement when you talk about, if I'm a child and I'm learning certain behaviors at home, like racism, which we know is a learned behavior.
Yes.
Those are the students. As a person of color, which I know you don't like the term, but as a person of color, I have to embrace even more. And I have to show them even more love. You may be a student who hates me because of my race, but I have to show you even more love and even more human kindness to undo the conditioning that you've endured that makes you hate me.
And you have to do it with boundaries. So you do everything with love and with boundaries, right? And I think one of the best lessons that my middle schoolers ever learned from me is, I love you and I want you to be successful, but I do have boundaries, right? And you're going to have to operate within my boundaries. But
give me an example of one of the boundaries. So when you talk.
So one of my boundaries in my classroom, because I needed everybody to feel safe, right? So I had two rules in my classroom. One, you could not tell anybody in the room to shut up, because I don't tell nobody to shut up, so you can't say it. And you can't call anybody stupid. I don't care what they do. And it might be a thought bubble in your head, but it better not come out of your mouth. Right. So my kids used to tell me that I was the coolest, strictest teacher that they knew. But they understood that Miss Battle had boundaries and expectations in her classroom because she needed everybody to feel safe. And I was, I treated everybody and I gave every student the way that what they needed, but I didn't treat them different, if that makes sense. If my favorite student did something that was out of line or unlike my expectations, they got in trouble too. I couldn't make exceptions for them because they're my favorite student, right? You still had to get the same consequences. And so I had boundaries in my classroom. I'm a disciplinarian by nature. And so, it was, I'm doing everything in love, but there are some boundaries that you are not going to cross with me, no matter what your belief system is at home. The respect that you give me, I'm sorry that y'all don't have this at home, but when we come here, this is what this is going to look like. I don't know any other way to put it.
So I agree. And look, Megan agrees as well. So one thing, I'm trying to find the right way of wording it. A lot of students, not a lot, but it's been an unfortunate huge increase in abuse and child abuse during COVID-19.
Yeah.
And it's a fact. It's a sad fact. It was quoted by our president in a news conference shortly after Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, made her big statement about the increase in child abuse that has come about. What are some things that teachers can do when the babies come back to school just to help every kid reset and get in the mindset of being back in school?
So when you talk about child abuse, Zach, you're talking about trauma, right? And so one of the ways that teachers can address trauma before they even address the kids is understanding what their own personal triggers are. I recommend that a trigger for Erica Battle is being yelled at and someone being really aggressive with me, right? And it was because of some things that happened in my childhood. So one of the things that we have to do as teachers is recognize what are our personal triggers and understand that when a child does something that is negative and disrupts the learning environment, it's really not even something personal, right? Sometimes misbehavior is a cry for help. And sometimes I do things because I need you to understand that this lashing out is nothing that I'm doing that I just need to, I can't lash out at home. So here I am. So as teachers, one of the things that we need to do first is understand what sets us off. So when we get into that classroom environment, and if something happens, we don't have that power struggle and we don't react. We already have our plan B in place. And I know that's number one. It's just teachers being aware of themselves, number one, right? Because I can't set up a loving environment if I'm very reactive when things happen. So I know what my triggers are. So I was very aware of my triggers. One of the things that I did to get kids back every year, I did this kind of a plan called the first 20 days. And in the first 20 days, I was very methodical on how the activities that I did. So I'm going to explain it very briefly. The first 5 days, I only did activities where I got to know the students independently. I didn't group them. I didn't pair them. I didn't do any of that stuff. I needed to just get to know my students as individuals. What makes you tick? What are some of the things that I noticed that makes you feel uncomfortable, right? So that was days 1 through 5. Days 6 through 10, I paired them. and my groups were very flexible. So you were paired with someone every other day. You didn't stay with the same person. Mm-hmm. And that was to get my students in the mindset that I will never be with the same person. And sometimes she might let me choose and sometimes not. Right. But I did that so kids could get to know each other on a more personal level. So days, 5 to 11 through 15, I did group activities where then they were no longer in pairs. They were in groups and my groups changed. And then the last, days 16 through 20, it was a mix. I might do an individual activity, then I might group the kids together, then I might do a pair activity. And people ask me, why did I do that? Well, what I did was, number one, I allowed my students to get to know multiple people in the classroom and not set up a clique, because Miss Battle is likely to pair you with anyone. And then I got them comfortable working with each other, but I didn't just put them in groups. I was very methodical on how I created that environment. Right. And I was very intentional with the things I had them do. So like, for example, with the group project, when I put them in groups of 3 to 4, I had them write a picture book on teamwork. And each person had a certain amount of pages. Like you might have had pages 1 and 2. I would have had pages 3 and 4. Somebody else had pages 5 and 6. And the other person had pages 7 and 8. Because number one, we're talking about teamwork. So I had, and I was a reading teacher, and it was a fun activity just to get them thinking about, all right, so how can but then it was also a teaching lesson. Not only were we talking about teamwork and what it meant to work together, but I also talked about setting, and I talked about characters, and I talked about plot, not as much, but enough for them to read the book, if that makes sense. And so that right there set my environment up at the very beginning of the year in the first 20 days, because it helped my kids to see that, hey, we're going to be working together, and I have to get comfortable working with multiple people in my classroom because she's going to pair me. Now, in the era of COVID-19, when kids can't move, there has to be an adjustment, right? And so, you can't move based on the CDC guidelines around the room the way that, you were doing it. And so, you have to think of ways, especially if kids are supposed to sit in one spot. I don't see how that's going to work. But anyway, if kids are supposed to sit in one desk for 8 hours, I don't see how that's going to work. So one of the things that you can do is you might be on this row today, but then after I disinfect tomorrow, I'm changing my seating arrangement. So you're sitting next to someone different, right? Just so kids don't get so comfortable with the same person that when I move you, you're working with someone else.
But teachers could even do this in the virtual environment based on what you said earlier around with small groups, and building up that camaraderie and building it up and kind of getting that environment set up. You could kind of do the exact same thing.
Yeah, you could.
Which is a plus. So anything else that any other nuggets of wisdom you can share with our teachers and educators around what they should maybe consider doing as they get ready to go back to school in a virtual environment?
One of the things that I would say is mindfulness, right? Give kids the opportunity to become mindful of their emotions and how they're feeling in this environment, and give space to express that, even if each kid has their own online journal where they can journal their thoughts and their feelings, making sure to have a structure set up, even in this environment, that your structure remains the same and consistent. I begin my class the same way, and I end it every day the same way. That might sound very trivial and rigid, but my classroom ran like a well-oiled machine, because I did not deviate from how I started or how I ended. And when I did deviate, it was chaos. I was all over the place, and the kids were all over the place because we had got used to that structure and routine. So even in this environment, structure and routines and consistency will be so important just to get kids in the mindset of learning, but then allowing them to have some space to be mindful of how they're feeling and a space to express those feelings.
And so what can we recommend to teachers that they do to honor their thoughts and their feelings and to kind of be ready to recharge and reset?
So,
I mean, that's great what you just said. I mean, that's great. I love that, with our babies.
Yeah, I mean, we have to. So if we want to talk about a technology piece, since we are going virtual, one of the things that we can do, and it allows the kids to be anonymous too, is using like something like a Mentimeter, where you do a word cloud. The kids get to put in, how are you feeling today? 2 words. No one knows who said what. And then the teachers pick a word out here or there, maybe comment, and then allow the kids to, I might not be as comfortable on camera, but what can you say about this in the chat? Right. And then to close it out, allowing kids to, just do their closeout on like a Padlet that continues each day so we can see the progression of feelings.
And so Tamika brings up a really good point, and we'll get ready to close because we're approaching the 90-minute mark. A real issue that has come up in the virtual environment has been, how do we meet the needs of our students that have exceptionalities? Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of concern where where the reality is teachers have not been able to meet the IEP demands or the individualized educational plans set aside for students who have them in a virtual environment. Is there any recommendations or anything that you would recommend teachers to do in these regards? I'll add to it at the end.
So one of the things that I had told one of my schools is to make sure that your para is just as involved now as they were when they were in the building, because the para is going to help you. First of all, the para sometimes has a better relationship with some of the kids than the teachers do, but the para is going to help you meet those individualized needs of those students when you can't touch them, because the kids have service hours. Listen, we're not Superman and we can't do it all. And so we have to, at this point, equip everybody to be all hands on deck. So,
everybody, right. Support staff has to really be support staff. Like everybody has to join in. A co-teacher is a co-teacher, and you've got to share the load. And it's up to your administration to create the systems to make sure that happens so that every kid is served and every kid is served in an appropriate and right way.
Exactly.
So that's exactly what I was going to say, is that teacher planning is essential in the virtual environment, just like it really is essential when you're back in the school. And my key takeaway, Eric, I want you to think about how would you summarize this as a key takeaway. I'm going to say my key takeaway from my conversation with you has definitely been the importance of that schedule and having a flexible schedule so that teachers can do the small group work with kids to create a classroom environment that will be conducive, and that they really give kids tools to work through their emotions at this time.
Well, you just summed it up. I think what we have to understand is, although we are not necessarily face-to-face, we still need those close interactions with each other. And just because we're not face-to-face does not mean that I can't meet your needs and I can't address how you're feeling right now, right? And so I think that as we begin this school year, although it's virtually, I want teachers to still think about the importance of the consistency. How consistent are we going to be, since we've had time to think about it and plan our consistencies? Think about the structures and routines that, we have to put in place, and to make sure that we stand by them so kids can get in that mindset of, oh yeah, this is a real school day. Learning is really taking place.
And so, Nina is a master teacher, right? Like, we worked together for years. She's a master teacher, and this is a phenomenal, absolute true comment. Like, this is a golden nugget, another tweetable moment, is that we really need the school systems need to set some time aside, period. Look at the IEPs and then adjust them to fit the virtual environment. so that accommodations are now going to be modified or created in a way that truly meets that kid's needs in a different learning environment. And I'm gonna be honest with you, Nina, I hadn't thought that. That just didn't occur to me as that needs to happen, but I think it's key. And the question
especially when kids are, guaranteed so many service hours. How are we going to meet that guarantee in the virtual environment? And honestly, to do a virtual session takes so much more out of a person than it does face to face.
Right. And that's why I recommend an adjustment to the day, is that you don't expect teachers to engage for long periods of time in explicit instruction, because it's not good for the teacher and it's not good for the student. It has to be modified so that real learning can truly take place. Everything is going to have to be adjusted.
Yeah, listen, let me tell you, I was on a meeting and we did it for 2 hours. And after that 2 hours, I felt like I had worked a full work day and it was only 2 hours. So can you imagine a teacher having to go from 8 to 3 and with just a 30-minute lunch break and a 60-minute planning, trying to deliver quality instruction?
It's impossible. And I hope that many of our school systems don't expect this kind of an expectation in the virtual environment, that they're going to really think outside of the box. But not only are our school systems thinking outside the box, but they're engaging teachers in the conversation and letting teachers truly inform the decisions that they are trying to make, because they're the ones who are able to give you this kind of advice off the front.
Right.
So it's been a great time, Erica. I appreciate it. I know I'm gonna give you a call. We can follow up. But thanks you to everyone who joined us. Erica, you can find her at The Erica Battle on Facebook. On Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn. Add her, chat with her. She's great, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you for having me.